it is finally time. I am going to release my Siren bag, and this is the tutorial on how to do it. So this is the bag. It's got very minimal hardware. It's got 2 zips. That's it. The base, I have used a vinyl mesh so all the sand can fall out. The inside, we're just going to bind shut, and then the outside has a multitude of different pockets going on. When you pull this top, it cinches up and kind of helps close the top of the bag, and I can easily fit 3 towels and like a floaty device on the inside, and then the pockets are just also huge. So if you would like to see how to make this, please stay tuned. So all we're actually going to need today are 2 zippers and some cord, and I have this really cool braided cord because I just thought it was really cool, so I bought a whole roll of each. I've got it in white and off-white. The outside I have interfaced with my Hefty, which is like a Form Fuse 1600, and then all of the pocket pieces that would fabric I have interfaced with a medium woven, and then I'm using waterproof canvas for the inside, so it means I don't actually have to interface any of that. So I'm going to start off with the lining. So this is a big lining piece. You should have 2 of these. So I'm going to find the center like this, and I'm just going to clip it. And then I'm going to find the center of both my pockets. Now you can change the location of these pockets to anywhere you like. The reason I've put them down so low is that it's going to help deter people from trying to steal your stuff at the beach. Because if you've got like a towel or something in your bag, you're less likely to see the zipper pocket, which means it's more incognito. So that's why I've put the pockets down as low as I have. So I'm going to take my zipper pocket, now that I've found the center of everything, and I'm just going to fold it in half with right sides together, and then grab my handy dandy zipper template. I don't know why I keep going for the big one. I've got a little one there. And then I'm just going to draw on my zipper hole, I guess, zipper hole. I'm going to fold over this, but I'm going to do the same thing. So do it to both, and then I can put the template away, because I am all about efficiency. Draw around that. The reason I'm drawing twice is this pen isn't super good at drawing. I think it's running out of ink, to be honest. All right. So we take 1 pocket, and the side that we drew on always goes to the bottom. So I'm just going to line up the center and put it down the bottom. Now you can adjust this to anywhere you like. You can have the pocket up the top or down the bottom. I want mine down the bottom so that they're more hidden. I like the idea of hidden. And I'm just going to put it, so I'm going to put mine 1 inch up from the bottom. Now I've had to change feet today. I've got a really skinny one in because the plastic one I bought recently snapped. So don't buy the clear plastic ones that you see. They are terrible. It didn't even hit anything, it just snapped. And I've only used it for less than a week. So I'm now without a vinyl foot. So I'm just going to have to vinyl tape everything if I'm using it until my new one arrives. So I went on eBay, bought another one. It's just going to cost a little bit more because it was from Australia, but it should be here quicker, so that's fine. All right, so I'm just going to trim off all my tails. Ooh, that looks terrible. So my stitches are having a bit of a meltdown. And that could be highly to do with my foot, since I've got a different foot in. There's always a lot of things stitches could be. It could be that you've threaded your machine wrong, but I can see that I haven't. So it's not that. It could be the bobbin, but I just checked it's not that either. So I'm just going to stitch around a second time. And I've just made the pressure on my foot a little bit more. Because it's this foot, it might need more pressure. I'm hoping that's it. Alright, let's try this one. Looks better. So I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to fold this in half and do a little snip in the center. And then when I get to the corner, I'm just going to triangle out those corners. And I do the same the other direction. Now this should be pretty easy if you're using waterproof canvas because it's not too thick. Okay, so then the best way to turn these pockets is instead of just turning it straight through, bend it over and crease that edge. Even if you're using cotton, I would just do that with an iron. So you crease it there to make it sit flat. Then you push the pocket through. And then it should sit relatively flat with very minimal effort. See, like that. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to grab one of my zippers, and I've already put the zipper pull on. And so I'm just going to lay it underneath, and I'm going to line up this edge of the fabric with the zipper because I have cut my zipper to the same width as the pocket. One more. Needle down, pivot, stitch along. I do like this foot actually. It's a little bit thinner, but it kind of works in your favor. Pivot, needle down, pivot. I don't even have to move my zipper out of the way with this foot. And then back stitch when you get back to the start. And so then when you pick this up, the back pocket should just fall down for you. So I'm going to fold it aside, start at the top, back stitch. Now we don't have to leave these pockets open because we don't actually have to turn this bag. While I'm here, I'm going to snip them. So we're also going to go along the bottom. And then we're going to go up the side. Oh, I just ran out of bobbin thread. I did know that was coming, so I prepped one. Right, new bobbin in. So I'm just going to start a couple of stitches back from where I was. Needle down. And then pivot up the side. And back stitch. Okay. And then trim off that tail. You don't want your tails. So that's one done. So we're just going to do exactly the same to the other side. So again, grab a ruler, measure it up. Line up the 2 points that you made for the center so that you know that they're in the center. Yep. Get the tails out of the way, like so. Now you don't even have to have your pockets at the same level. You can actually put your pockets wherever. I just decided that I wanted to do them here. You could actually do them all the way down so that the seam is in the bottom, but it's just more layers you're going to have to stitch when we're doing our binding. So you may or may not wish to do it that way. I'm still connected. So then again, we're just going to snip it in the center. I'm doing the second one faster because it's the same thing we just did. Out, out. So I'm triangling out the corners. Then I'm going to finger press this flat, finger press this flat, push it through, get my thumbs and kind of just hook those edges, and then press it flat like that. And that's pretty flat with no, what's it called? No iron, that's the word I was looking for. Now I'm making both my zips close to the left, which means when they're in the bag, they're actually going to look opposite. But by doing this, it also means that you don't have to think about which way is the front and which way is the back for the lining. You can just pop it in and off you go. And I'm probably only mentioning that because the next pattern I just started designing doesn't do that, which is why it's on my brain. Always zip. You should always zip the zipper out of your way. And then trim off your tails as you go. Less tails is always better. Oh, I lied. I put the zipper in the other way. There you go. So mine are going to face the same way in the bag. It actually doesn't matter. Either way will look like you designed it that way. Trim that out. Okay, so that is my second zipper all done. Trim those bits off there. So now we're just going to make the whole inside while I've got the pieces. So we need our main center bit, and we're going to put those right sides together and then stitch down that edge. Start here, back stitch, stitch down, and then back stitch at the other end. Then when I fold this, I want to fold it so that the seam allowance is actually going to go that way. Now I don't have to top stitch that, but you can if you want to. If that's going to bother you, you can top stitch it. And then I'm going to grab this one and add it to here. So again, line it up, stitch, back stitch, off we go. I don't know if I've mentioned it recently, but I recently got a plate with measurements on it, and can I just say, best decision ever. I actually think I can sew faster now because of it. So we're going to open it up again and get the next one. So I just made like a big line, and you're just alternating square to curvy bit, square bit to curvy bit. Back stitch, trim that off, take off the tails, and then we're just going to bring around this part to close up the bag. Like so. I'm going to stitch from the bottom up. Probably doesn't really matter, but I feel I'm going to have better success up here. Right, so now we've got this cool little loop thing going. Now while we're on the lining piece, I'm also going to take these pieces. Now these are the parts that we're going to use as loops. So I'm going to put double-sided tape. Now, if you didn't want to use double-sided tape, you could also iron this, and depending on your fabric, it may or may not stay. This particular fabric is, I think it's designed for like swimming shorts. It's like Trunks microfiber or something like that. I got this at Spotlight. They have a bunch of designs. They actually had a really cool like margarita fabric that I nearly bought. But I feel like this one's slightly more family friendly. All right, so I'm putting double-sided tape at all ends, and then I'm just going to peel off the backing if it wants to come, which sometimes it doesn't. If you can't get your backing off, just rub it back and forth in your fingers, and it kind of heats the glue up from the friction and helps it to stick better. The pressure also helps as well. There we go. So that's all of those off. And then I'm just going to turn under 1/2 inch. So I'm using the ruler on my table to help me with this. You could also mark a 1-inch line and then just fold it up to the line. That would also work for you if you wanted to do it that way. And then I'm just smoothing it down, and the double-sided tape is sticking it for me. Now, depending on how thick of a rope, I've made this so you can use all size thicknesses in this. You can trim this shorter if you've got a really skinny rope. I actually like it bigger because it kind of helps to pull the bag in, but you don't have to keep it that long. Oh, I just got a knot. It's not my day for sewing today. Hasn't been my week for sewing, actually. I keep snapping things. Okay, so I'm just going to top stitch along that edge. So I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. It just looks a little bit different because of this foot. I'm not super worried about back stitching because all these edges are going to be tucked in. But we're just stitching it so it stays down. And I like top stitching from the top. I think it looks neater. That's just my personal preference. Right, and so then we're just going to fold this in half. And I'm going to baste along the long edge as well. And this is just so it doesn't move while I'm trying to stitch it. I like things when they're single. So you could skip this stitching if you wanted to and just go straight to clipping it to the bag. But if you're new to sewing, I highly recommend doing it. I mean, I do it anyway because I don't like things to have too many layers where possible. Right. So now we're going to grab our lining piece. And I'm going to grab some Wonder Clips and just clip it into the center here. Now it should be slightly smaller. That is the idea. So you just line it up in the center. Where are my clips? Here they are. And we're just going to clip it. And again, I'm probably going to baste this in place as well. I love a good basting. It's going to make it easier to join everything later if there's less pieces. So I'm going to clip the other side and then I'll baste it in place so I can take the clips off. And then your lining is complete. You don't have to use a lot. You just use enough clips that you feel comfortable that it's not going to shift while you're stitching. And again, you don't have to baste this like I'm going to if you don't want to. I'm just going to do it because it helps, in my opinion. So I'm just going to start on the fabric. I'm also tucking in that seam allowance towards the flat centered main panel. And so that's going to hold that in place as well because we're basting that down. So it's just one more thing that the basting's helping with, really. And so now all of this is just going to be one glorious piece. So again, I'm going to tuck that seam allowance underneath. Back stitch because I love back stitching. And I'm just stitching nice and close to the edge. And then again, I'm going to tuck that seam under there. And back stitch when I get to the other end. Trim off the tails. And so that is your entire lining piece done. Looks fabulous. So I'm going to pop that aside and now we can move on to the outside because the outside has more pieces. So I'm going to start with my front slip pocket. So we're going to take one lining piece and one outside piece and put right sides together. Now some of my testers did beautiful bags where they made the center piece a different color and that actually was really cool, but I had already cut these, or half cut them at least. So I'm going to line up this one as well. Then stitch back stitch, and around we go. Now curves are tricky, so go slowly. Don't knock the other one off the table. One. Then I'm just going to continue with the second one and chain stitch it in. Because I love chain stitching. It is quicker, it saves money, it saves time. And then we can grab this first one, trim off the tail. And then I'm going to get my zigzag scissors or pinking shears, whatever you prefer to call them. Personally, I like zigzag scissors. And I'm just going to cut off some of the excess to get nice and close to the stitching so that the curve's going to curve nicely for us. So now that I've gone pretty close, but not so close I might have nicked it. And so then we can just add some more clips if you need to. You could also iron this if you wanted to. Depending on what kind of fabric you're using, will depend on what you end up doing. And then I'm clipping. If you don't have pinking shears or the zigzag scissors, you can just kind of cut most of it off or cut in like little lines like this to help it curve through. So then I'm just going to come and I'm going to top stitch this. I'm going to back stitch so it's locked in. And then I can grab this one off and trim this. And this is chain stitching at its finest. I try not to chain stitch more than 2 things at a time though. I find it gets a bit much. Right, trim off the curve. And then again, I'm going to flip it and I'm going to clip it. Oh, that rhymes. Now again, you don't have to clip it, you could iron it. I don't know how this fabric would go ironing from the top. I iron from the bottom when I put my interfacing on. Okay, so then we're going to come over here and we're going to top stitch again. So we're going to back stitch. That is now our top little slip pockets. So I'm going to grab my main center and then I'm going to line all of this up, grab some clips, and we're going to stitch all 3 sides so that again it becomes one piece and it won't move on us. Like so, and then the other side. Apparently the other side needed a lot more clips than this one, but that's okay. So I'm going to start just at the slip pocket and I'm just doing 1/8 of an inch from the edge and then needle down and pivot, go across the bottom, needle down, pivot again, and up the side. Now you won't see this stitching, it's just going to help later. So again, that is now one piece. Grab our other one, do the same. So I always like to line up the bottom first. And then go up the sides. One there. And then start here, lift up my needle. Whoops. Just spat out my thread. I always chop a fresh end when I'm going to thread the needle. I find it much easier. Let's try that again. There we go. Down, needle down, pivot, across the bottom, and then up the side. And back stitch. The thread just snapped then. I think it might be nearly time for a new needle. I'm trying to think the last time I changed it. A general rule of thumb is 9 hours of sewing, which for me is almost 1 a day. I didn't change it this morning, but I'm trying to think if I changed it yesterday or not. So there's our second pocket. You could also, if you wanted to, try and match up this print. I actually just centered like a fun part of the print on this slip pocket and then didn't pay too much attention to the other bit. I know that sounds dodgy, but you don't really pay attention to the top part of the pocket. It's all about the front. So now I'm going to take the main body slip pockets and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to stitch right sides together along the top edge. Stitch, back stitch, and off we go. And I'm going to chain stitch these because why not? Just make sure you're stitching the top edge and not the bottom, otherwise your pocket will go upside down. Unless your print doesn't matter. And again, if you wanted to, you could line up the print on these so that they're going to sit the same as the other ones. So I'm going to fold this over and under. Nope, okay. So I'm going to put this one, I'm going to put the lining on top. Fold it and crease it. And then fold it over. That's better. And then again, I'm going to top stitch with the same top stitching I always do, which for me is 1/8 of an inch. Although mine might be a little bit different because of this foot. As I used to always judge it with my other foot. Now if you're new to top stitching and 1/8 of an inch is way too close for comfort, do 1/4 of an inch. Won't make a big difference. Work your way up to 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just rolling this seam, and again, I probably could have tried to iron it. You can iron my waterproof canvas, just not for too long. I always do it on a hot setting, but I don't hold it on for 10 seconds. That's most likely going to mess it up. Okay, now they're top stitched. I'm going to trim off this tail and then grab a main body piece and line this up along the 3 edges again, exactly like we did for the other one. And I'm going to baste it in place because I love basting. It is my friend. Needle down, pivot, and my basting is always within the seam allowance. So I'm actually doing it 1/8 of an inch because I always do. But I could get away with a little bit more if I needed to. Okay, so now I'm going to find the center. So one pocket I'm going to do in half. And the other side I'm going to do in thirds. And the reason I chose to do it like that is because something bigger like a book will fit in the half side. And then the third side can be divided up for things like sunscreen, after sun care, thongs, or jandals, or I don't know what else you call them. So I've got the mark in the middle anyway, but I can also just do this and find the middle. So I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up to the top. Like that, and then when I get up to the stitching, I'm going to back stitch twice just to help reinforce there so it doesn't snap at any given point. And so that is the 2 pocket side. I'll just use up another whole bobbin. Alright, I'm going to hit pause while I do up another one. Give me a minute. Switch to a wider foot. Just because I know I'm about to do some binding, so I'm hoping that that's going to help. So, first off, again, we are going to baste this down. Oh, no, okay. I never fully wind my bobbins because they give me grief sometimes, like right now. It's all knotted itself up. Not quite sure how it manages it, but it does. It's a bit clever like that sometimes. So let's try the whole holding it like we're meant to. There we go. Right, stitch along the edge, needle down, pivot, along the bottom, needle down, pivot, up the edge. Apparently my cutting was not as straight as I anticipated. I've got a little bit extra here. I can just trim it off though, it's fine. So this pocket we're going to put in thirds. So you need a ruler and we need to do thirds. I love thirds. There. And there. Double check I've done it. Yes. Excellent. Now again, you don't have to do perfect thirds. You could actually, if you know exactly what you want to put in your bag, you can just make your pockets the appropriate size and they've always kind of got a home. I'm doing it this way because I can. And you always sew these from bottom to top, and I'm going to back stitch twice at that top bit just to really reinforce the pocket. I'm going to move my clips. I'm going to fold this over so I can get it in my throat. Back stitch, up the line, back stitch twice, and then pull it out. And then I'm going to go back and trim off all of my tails, of which there are many because I haven't done it. Cool, so now we've got our thirds. So you've got a half and a third. If you have a front versus back center part, you might want to think about where you're putting that, but I don't. So we're just going to stitch it on. Line it up. And again, if you need to, use some wonder clips. I probably wouldn't use pins, especially if you're using the waterproof canvas. And then you want to go slower here. We're going up. I know I always usually sew top to bottom, like thicker to thinner. Today I'm not. And then as an added extra, if you want to, I'm going to top stitch. Actually, no, I'm not. If I top stitch here, I'll lose a little bit of my pocket. So I'm not going to do that, but you could if you wanted to. It's going to hold in there anyway, but you can top stitch it. It just means your pocket will be that little bit thinner. So then again, we're going to do this side. Going slower as you get to the thicker part, so you don't snap a needle. Nobody wants to see that. Then we're going to grab the next one again. So we're just making like a long line alternating between main body and center curve. And then main body and then center curve. And I'm using the guide on here. If you don't have a guide, you could also... Why is that one way bigger? Right, so this is how bad my cutting was the other day. If I lay this flat, look at how much bigger that is. So to combat this, I'm going to stitch there and then trim off the excess. Nothing's impossible to fix, guys. Nothing. Problem solved. Then I'm going to take this one and we're going to close up our circle. I know it's not much of a circle, but it kind of is. Find my top thread. Welcome back. Okay. Down we go. And backstitch. Trim our tails. Now, before we go any further, I am going to trim off some of the bulk at the bottom and the top. You could probably cut it the whole way if you wanted to. Now, the reason I'm doing this is for lots of reasons. The top is so that it's not bulky up there. The bottom is both so it's not bulky and it's going to be easier to sew our binding on. Because sometimes binding likes to get a bit tricky. And we want to make it as easy as possible. So I'm just cutting it pretty close to there. And then I'm veering off. You can veer off as quickly or as casually as you like. Alright, so that should be all of them now. And so now we need to grab our inside piece. And because we've turned it in the right way, we can literally just pop it inside and then start matching up all of the seams and edges. And this is a huge bag. Did I mention that? I don't think I mentioned that. So I can fit quite comfortably 3 towels and still have room for like other stuff. Also, if you wanted to, you could put the slip pockets on the inside as well to have even more pockets. But I was more about shove the towels in the center and put everything on the outside so they're easy to get. But you don't have to do it that way. You can just add the same outside pockets literally to the inside pieces, but you'd have to move your zipper pockets up if you were going to do that. So many hacks you can do to this bag. Create your own. So I'm starting with the big straight sides because I always find it easier to clip straight sides, and I always clip it in my lap. I know that's probably less easy for you guys to see, but in my lap means I'm not stretching out my arms, so I'm not hurting my shoulders. Because sometimes it can get a bit much. So then again, we're clipping around the curve. You can set it wherever you like to do this. Like that. Oops, I missed. There we go. And then we've just got one more curve. Now you could potentially sew this without clipping it, although I personally wouldn't try. I don't think, but you could. I like the clips. It's going to hold everything right where I say it needs to be. Right, so I'm going to start anywhere I like. I'm thinking right here, on a straight but not in a corner. I don't like to start in corners most of the time. There's obviously exceptions to every rule. I'm going to stitch. I'm going to clean up my clips as I go, needle down and pivot. And then around and round we go. So we're going to have to clip this curve as well to make sure it's going to sit in the bag nicely. And you want to clean your clips up so that they don't get in the way like mine just did then. Needle down. Oh, sorry, I just knocked the camera. Knew that was going to happen. Always happens with big bags. Sorry about that. I'll try and bring it over so it doesn't. Now, lesson to be learnt from this is don't have your sewing machine up against the wall because you'll run into the wall a lot. try and have space behind, even if it's just a little bit of a gap where things can kind of fall off the table in a downwards, kind of like curving down, especially if you're going to make bigger items. That's why mine kind of float in the middle of the room. Needle down, pivot, last bit. Back to the start, back stitch. Scissors, and then we're going to trim off the bulk in these corners here. I might actually use, where are my other scissors? For bulky cutting things, I actually prefer to use my Class A. I find that they cut through the layers better than the Fiskars, but I like to cut all of my pattern pieces with Fiskars as they're less harsh on the hands. So I couldn't actually recommend, if you were to only buy one pair, I don't know which ones I'd recommend. I like the two. This cuts bulk really nicely, but the other ones, if you do a lot of sewing, you want something that doesn't hurt your hand. So, I don't know. I can't give you an answer to that one, I'm afraid. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut the excess out of the curve. And this, when we turn it through, will make the curve sit nicer, which I am all about. I like nice sitting things. So that's one side. And then the other. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see, but the angle that I'm doing it is a little bit awkward. Always try and use as much of your blade of the scissors as possible. It's a little bit more tricky to do that with the curve, but you should always try. Right, so now that we're happy, we've cut off all the excess, we're literally just going to turn it in the right way. So, I'm going to poke out these corners with my hand, like that, and that one, and wherever this one is, there we go. And then I'm going to just push the lining inside the bag, like this. Now I want to baste the base together. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure that this seam allowance is facing the same way as the opposite end, so that there's no twist in the lining, because we don't want that. So I'm going to put 2 clips there. Then I'm going to line up the center, put a clip there, come and do this other side. And again, I'm looking into the bag to make sure I'm putting it in the right direction. I will add more clips, but I just like to start by doing it this way, and then I can always come and add more. Line up all the important points, and for the most part, everything else should just fall into place like that. You can add more clips. I'm actually going to see if I can do it without that. And I'm just going to baste the bottoms together. Now you want to get pretty close to the edge. And I'm just going to keep rolling it around as I'm going. I've got a little bit of excess there, so I will fix that in a minute. You also want to try and not get any pulls or tucks or anything, if you can help that as well. So this again, we're just turning it into a single piece, because I love single pieces. Like that. And then again, I've just got a little bit of excess here, so I'm going to trim that off like so. Whoopsies. So your bag's nearly finished. Now, if you want to, you can come and top stitch this top edge. I might do that in a minute, but we're just going to attach the base now. So I'm going to turn the bag inside out. Okay, so we want to find the center of all four sides. So if you can't already see where that is, actually I've got a clip there. I'm just going to add another clip. So we want to find the center of all four sides of the bag. So I'm going to pull it this way and I just match up the seams and add a clip. You could also trim it, but we've just basted the edge, so you probably don't want to do that. Then we're going to grab our base. Now I'm using a vinyl mesh, so it's very, very sturdy. It's still soft and supple, like it still screws up into a ball, but it doesn't really hold the shape of that. So it is thick but flexible is probably the best way to describe it. So I'm going to fold this in half, and then again I'm going to mark the center because this is the easiest way to do all of this. And then we're going to fold it this way and mark the center of the ends like this. Now, this is going to seem opposite, but just bear with me. The center of the main panel, so the big panel, gets the skinny end. So I'm going to clip that there with 2 clips. So like this, which means the straight edge will be clipped to the center dipped part. And this just makes it easier to carry over your shoulder. So like that. So that the bag will sit like this. So now that I've got those few clips on, I'm going to grab some more clips and just keep clipping. And then again, we're going to baste this on. I love basting. You could try, if you wanted to, and add the piping at the same, oh, not piping, sorry, the binding at the same time, but I do not recommend it. I wouldn't even do it that way with my binding machine, so. But you can try if you want to. If you're that good, you could save some time, really. You could add the binding into these clips now. But I won't be, because it's way too hard. It's got too much chance to slip, and I don't want that, because then I have to unpick. And I'd prefer to have to sew an extra 4 lines than unpick. I hate unpicking. My pet hate of the world. I do it if I have to, but if there's a way around it, I won't. Alright, so that is now clipped on, and if you've done the seam allowances that I suggested, this fits perfectly. So, again, with the really close to the edge, we're just going to baste it again. We're just doing lots of bastings. There's just going to be layers of stitching, but that's okay because it just means your bag's extra strong. Now, even though this is vinyl mesh and a metal foot, it's still working out quite nicely. I know you can't see right now. I'm sorry about that. You need to continue moving it around like a 3D object. There's not really a camera angle that I could do that you could see this well. I can literally only see as like a tunnel vision point. So then again, squish it down. I'm not exceeding a 1/4 inch, so that we guarantee will not see these stitches later. Alright, I'm going to tidy up the clips as I go so that I've got lots of space to work in. And again, we're bringing it around and down. like that, get back to the start and backstitch. Boom. Your base is on. So now you just want to go back around and make sure you didn't miss anywhere. And then if you've got a little bit of excess sitting out like this, I'm just going to trim that off because we want this to sit on as nicely as possible. Excellent. Now I'm just using a polyester binding I got from Vardman Threads. So you can buy it in different size rolls. I plan on using a lot of this, so I bought a big roll. The reason I like polyester binding is because I can just melt it. If you don't want to order this, you can use herringbone tape from Spotlight, or you could use a double folded bias binding, and you will want to cut it on the bias because of the curves. You have options, is all I'm saying. I'm going to be using the polyester one. So all I'm going to do is fold it over in half and clip it on. And I'm going to make all my clips face the base because that's the side I will be stitching from. And you kind of want to pull it with, oops, not that much. You want to pull it with a little bit of tension so that as you're stitching, it's not going to get any weird loops or anything in it. So we just want to pull, fold in half and clip down. Now I do actually have a machine that does this for me. My cylinder arm binding machine. So I might do my second bag on that just to show you. Because you may own a cylinder arm or you may be thinking about it for bag making. I do love mine for bag making. It is a compound foot, so it's a walking foot. And so long as you get a table or you get, you know, your awesome partner to make you a table like I did, you can use it like a normal machine as well. So the clips will get closer together as I go around this curve, and then they'll spread further out as we're on the straight. Because you really want to hold this in place. But no, I do love the polyester binding because I get to melt it at the end. If you're using a bias binding, you would just tuck under the raw edge or the herringbone. You just tuck it under before you stitch it down. Not the first end that we did, but the last end, because we overlap it just a little bit to hide that first end. I know I'm doing this in my lap, but it's really hard to do it all the way out there. But I am just folding it over and clipping it down. Another good thing about this polyester binding is I know it's probably not going to rot because it is in a beach bag. Everything on this bag is polyester, actually, or vinyl, or not cotton. But I did make my own with a cotton lining, so you can do it, and I did, because mine is green and fabulous. Like everything of mine is green. Alright, so we're coming up to the final curve. You'll notice I'm also not cutting this off, because I will just use it like this and then chop it off once I need to chop, and that saves me a lot when I'm buying it in bulk like this. I did put down that you need 2.1 meters. You actually need just over 2. I think it was like 2 meters and 2 centimeters. So I just put 2.1 so that you didn't underbuy. If you only bought 2 meters, it wouldn't fit. And I didn't want that for you. We're nearly there, nearly back to the start. And again, if I was using the binding machine, I wouldn't have to do all this clipping. You can also get bias machines for this. I do have one, but I don't... It takes a lot to set up, so I'd want to be making more than one of these bags to bother doing it, because it probably took almost as long as it took me to do this to set the machine up properly. But I will do a video on it one day. I got it for when I was doing aprons, to do all the binding on all the aprons. So, I've just cut it a little bit longer than I needed it. So there's the start, and this is just going to overlap like this. And then I'm going to use 2 clips to clip down that last little bit. And so now your bottom is bound. Now you want to start just after. So here's my join. I'm going to start like 1/2 inch after the join. You don't want to start on the join because then there's no wiggle room in case you pinned it wrong. So I'm just going to start here and I'm going to go slowly, and I've just still got it on a joining stitch length. I'm not lengthening it at all. And I'm just going to stitch around the binding. Now, if you pulled it taut enough, you won't get any kind of ripples. But if you do, you can just keep moving the ripple around until we get back to that start point, and then we can make it go away. You always want to stop with your needle down, and then again, 3D object, so I'm lifting it up. But because I have already basted all of this together, this is going much quicker than if I hadn't have. Now, I'm going to just trim off those tails because they're kind of hanging down where I am trying to sew. Now this is very, very thick. There's lots of layers here, so do go slowly. I do believe you could do this on a domestic. I'd put a jeans needle in though because of the layers, but just go slowly. We're not in a hurry anyway, people. Right, 3D object, last end. Now it looks like I've pulled mine tight enough and I didn't get any kind of bubbles, which is awesome. I just want to make sure that last little bit's tucked under. So I'm going to stitch over the end, and then I'm going to back stitch, and I'm also going to stitch up and off the folded edge, just so it stays where it's told. And I have to do a little bit more melting. And then we flip it over to double check that we've caught all of the other side as well. But that, I know it looks a bit funny, but it's just all the layers. But your base is on, so you can just turn the bag out through the top. And then you want to push out all of your binding. I like to stand up for this. Push it all out like that, so that your bag's going to sit lovely and flat. And there you go, look at that. Beautiful curves. Beautiful bag, really. So we're going to, do we want to top stitch? I'll top stitch. Why not? You don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's just like a detail. I am going to crank the stitch length up so it goes quicker though. So I'm just going to top stitch 1/4 inch from the seam. And this is just going to hold everything down. You don't have to do this. This is definitely an optional extra. And it's mainly just to keep these curves sitting flat and glorious. Although if you've sewed it the way I did and then pulled your base down, it should sit nicely anyway. But again, optional extra. Especially if you've got a beautiful contrasting thread color going on, this would look great. And I'm stitching it with the right side up because I always like the top stitch better than the bobbin stitch. There's not necessarily anything wrong with the bobbin stitch. I'm also going to trim off these tails. I just don't think it's as pretty, personally. Alright, up to the end, back stitch, pull it out, trim your tails, voila. Now, this is a 2 meter piece. You can obviously adjust it if you want it longer or shorter. And I've put tape on the end because this stuff frays very, very quickly. 2 ways to turn this through. One is a good old loop turner that I use a lot. And if you don't have one of these, safety pin is your friend. I will be doing loop turner today, but to do the safety pin, you just clip it and then just slowly feed it through. This one, however, much quicker. So I'm gonna put the loop turner through. I'm gonna hook the end onto my little finger, and then you just poke it out the end like this. Grab our cord and just pull it through like that. Now, because this is such a big open loop, it is quite easy to do. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to thread this on, grab my end, hook it on like that, and then just pull it on through. They are about $7 at Spotlight for anyone that's interested. I love my loop turner. Now, to stitch this shut, I'm sure there's lots of different ways. I'm going to do it this way. So I'm just going to take where the sticky tape is and overlap them, and I'm going to stitch vertically back and forth to join it all together. I'm going to leave the sticky tape on. I'm going to go down to a joining stitch length, and I'm going to zigzag back and forth to join it all. Now, we're not going to see this join, so I don't necessarily care what it looks like, so long as it's not going to be super bulky like a weird knot. So I've stitched it back and forth several times. I didn't count. Just do it until you can pull it really hard and it won't break. And then I'm just going to thread, I'm just going to pull it until the gap goes into this side bit, so then we won't see it. And there you go. Your bag is done. I like the long handle so that I can get it on there, and then even when it's full, I've still got the space under my arm. But that is your choice. And then when we pull this, see how this gathers? And because it's so big, it actually kind of helps closes off the top of the bag. So that is the bag. I hope you sew one, and I hope you enjoy sewing it. So until next time, guys, bye-bye.